To do the veneer. This is where the four-way mirror, or the mirror comes in to kind of choose what you want to do. And you've got a lot of options. You know, even with a boring veneer like this, we can make a little, if we were to carefully set this up, and we had enough room, we could make a little diamond shape. You guys can come in further here. So you can do a diamond if you got a little bit of sap in there, or even all the straight grain can still make a diamond shape in there. But now what we have to consider here is how well it fits on more of a squarish thing rather than a big rectangular thing. So this long, narrow diamond might look a little funny put onto this substrate here because it might cut the ends off or get really close here but not here. So that's something to consider. The other thing that you gotta watch out for here is our substrate is about, let's call it 15 by 16. So that means a quarter of that is what we are going to be using for our pieces of veneer, right? So we're looking at 7.5 to 8 inches square is what we need. So that means if we try to do too severe of a turn here, which we could get a smaller diamond in there, we just have to make sure that we can get a piece that's about 8 inches by 8 inches square. We wouldn't in this case, right? Because at 8 inches out, there's 7.5 to 8 inches. I would have a triangle or a bit that's missing there. So I can only get, so I could get a diamond about this size out of there, I think. Pretty close. So that's just something to watch for. The narrower that the veneer is, the less ability you have to tilt that far. So make sure you just double check that before you start going. So I don't think I'm going to use walnut on there. I use this on the sides. I think I'm going to use this as well. But again, starts out as a pretty boring veneer, but I can do the same thing here and tilt. And on this one, being so wide, I think I have the ability to tilt pretty far. So I'm getting about an 8 by 8 square out of that one. So here, let me just turn this around. So the first step is to decide where you want your pattern to be. I'm going to go something like that, and just like we did with the two-way book match, I'm just going to make a few marks just so I know approximately where I want it to be when I get there. So I don't want to deal with this entire thing, so I'm going to cut. I don't need anything except for what's in this area, so if I cut myself 4 pieces around that length, I should have enough to do this. So being a 4-way book match, I have to have 4 pieces here. 1, 2, 3, 4. And knife. So this is just a rough cut, so no big deal using utility knife. But try and remember to come in from both edges as we normally do, so that you don't tear this out, because if you blow out this end, it's very easy to tear it out. So in this direction. four-way book match starts out exactly like the two-way book match did. We have to stack all these pieces up in order and make sure that with a four-way book match, particularly like I'm doing it with tilting it, theoretically, not only do you want to line your veneers up this way, but you need to align them this way too, and make sure that any features are lined up both directions, or else when that sort of diamond comes together, things aren't going to match as well. However, with this veneer, there isn't a lot of features going the other way. Everything is going this way. So it's going to be hard for me to tell for sure. I don't see, sometimes you get a little pinhole knot or something in there that you can use as a reference. With straight grain veneer like this, it's not as big of a deal. But if you've got something that's got very definite grain structure to it, or definite features, you're going to want to make sure when you line this up, because I just stack these up and I cut it randomly. That doesn't mean that they're in the right orientation this way. So you need to look this direction and look at any features this way and make sure that you've shifted this direction as well to line it up. So this one's pretty straightforward. All I got to do is line up all these lines here, just like we did in the two-way. Oh, and let's not forget to number them. So 1, 2, 3, 4, and for later, this will make sense later, I'm going to put a 4 on the back side with a circle around it, 3 on the back side, 2, and 1. And this is so I can identify which one's upside right and which one's upside down. So now let's match these up. The more careful you can be at this stage, the better off. Because when you got 4 pieces that have to come together, it's more critical that these line up initially than it was on the two-way. Tape it up the same way. Do the other end. Now, you could simply make this cut and then make a cut at a right angle to it and hope that you are the most precise person on earth and can make a perfect 90-degree cut on all 4 of these pieces and they would all come together. But that's really hard to do, so we're going to do it in 2 stages. We're going to make one of these cuts and we're going to take it apart, put two pairs together, stack them on top of each other, and then make a right angle cut and put it together. So that'll make more sense when you see it. So I can make this first one just basically on the line that I drew. I usually pick the sort of the longer cut first and do that first, and then we'll do the other one in a bit. So I'm going to line this up the exact same way that I cut veneer normally. Again, this one isn't super critical. The next cut will be really critical. But this one, I'm just cutting on my line, roughly. And I'm going to break off some pieces to use under here. Remember see how far this is sitting up here. If I put a clamp on there without the pieces of veneer in there, it would bend the ends up and I wouldn't get as much pressure in the middle. So I can just use some of the same veneer, 4 pieces of it, and put it under there to help keep the clamp from bending it. This one, put it over here. This one, I probably don't need it because I'm very close. The clamp is pretty much right on top of the veneer over here. If this was further over, I could put in a couple pieces under this end as well. All right. So, remember, take your time on these cuts. If you push too hard or your saw is dull, you're going to tear out. So you want to, this is pretty thick veneer, so it's taking me 3 to 4 strokes per piece. Cut it. All right. So, I'm running out of room on my board here. It's easier to illustrate if we were doing a circular book match. And let's just say we did an eight-way book match. And we simply took number 1, number 2, upside down, 3, 4, 8. We'd have piece number 1 against right next to piece number 8, right? Which could be a serious mismatch, depending on the grain, how much it's changing as it goes through the stack. So one of the ways that we fix that is, instead of going that way, we'll go 1, 3, 5, 7, 2, 4, 6, 8. Obviously with every other one upside down. Oops. That way we never have, we kind of mix it up, shuffle it a little bit. We never have more than, we're never off by more than 2. These 2 are off by 1 and the rest of them are off by 2. So we can do the same thing with a square one. If we went 1, 2, 3, 4, we would be off by 3. So we can do the same thing, even though it's not as obvious. We can do 1 there, 3 there, 2, and then 4. So nothing's off by more than 2. So that's how we're gonna construct our 4-way book match. So we're gonna use that picture, which I do have in a handout for you guys as well. And we're gonna make sure that things line up that way as we tape it together. So I'm going to untape these. This makes a lot more sense when you actually see it. Yeah. All right. So I got number 1 here, number 2, 3, and 4. So if I look at my picture, I need, if 1 is up and 2 is next to it down, like that. I got 1 up and 2 down. And then I need 4 up, 3 upside down. So I've got 3 here upside down and 4 here right side up. If I put them together, I've got 1, 3 upside down, 4, 2 upside down. So I'm going to tape them together like this. And I completely forgot, I hope I get a good seam out of this, I forgot to sand the seam after I cut it. So I would have wanted to, so I'll sand the next one for sure. But you want to remember to sand it with the sanding block after. see how this comes out. So now I got to try to get these V's to line up here in the grain. And what's crazy about this is this kind of veneer sometimes, remember the whole tight side, loose side thing that reflects light a little different? Well, when I'm looking at this in certain light, the stuff that matches, one of them's dark and one's light. So you got to kind of look around and see until you get where things look the same, and try to make sure that all the V's match up there. They seem to. Because if you don't get that, if you get off, if you go by light versus dark, you could end up with a mismatch, and that would be pretty severe when we then book match to the other piece here. That one taped. Tape this one together. It's the same thing. I need to find the place. This one's harder for some reason. Good there. Remember when you tape these, use a big enough piece of tape that you can get one down good, and then pull that joint together. All right, so once these are together, I'm going to lay it back out like my picture here, and there's my line. My line, I'm going to make note where I drew that line is about a quarter inch, maybe 3/8 of an inch from this V here, because I'm going to flip this like this. And remember, when we cut our veneer, we always leave it stacked up the way it came in the tree, right? So that everything matches, so that we're cutting through the same point on all the sheets. So when I flip this over, I need to flip it back so that things were in the order they were in the tree. So in other words, on this side, I'm seeing something with a circle on it, and underneath it is also something with a circle on it. So I know it's back the way it was in the tree. If I had this flipped over, or if I put it, actually it works out like that as well. Either way, it ends up working out. But if I did that, I might end up back to the 1, 2, 3, 4 situation. So I want to keep it the way that picture is. I don't want to flip anything over at this point. So all I did was simply keep it like it was and flip it straight over. So now I got to stack these two up, but I have to, the one rule I've got here is the two seams have to stay aligned. So I can't do this, right? Because otherwise when I cut it, I'd end up with a seam kind of going like this across, and I want them to be at right angles. So, but I have to match the grain up on all these parts, or try to. So all I can do is slide it back and forth along the seam. So if you come up here and look, like I've slid it way back, this stripe does not line up with that stripe at all, right? But as I slide this further and further, right about there, it lines up, right? So the question is, oops, it's on tilted down here. And so that's pretty well lined up. So how about this side? It's pretty darn close. And how about on this end? It's really close. But I can't shift off I've got to stay on the seams. So I do the best I can, sliding back and forth to sort of average all the matching out. So then I'm going to tape
Any consideration for folding it over?
What do you mean?
Well, you have 2 sheets of 2 that are attached. You could fold each sheet of each 2 into one again.
Oh, you fold it this way?
Yeah, because it's attached with the tape. It's not going to shift anymore.
So you mean just for the lining up to check?
Yeah, I mean, you could fold it over and then stack them.
Oh. You,
Would that be so you only have to cut it once instead of twice like he's doing right now?
Basically, yeah.
let's see if we...
You could fold it either way, too. I don't know which way would be
Would that
better,
put
but...
pressure on the tape?
I'd have to think about what the implications of that are. I've never tried it. This way I'm sure that things are lining up, but I guess if you folded it over and made sure your edges were well aligned, the hard part would be knowing, I don't know, I'd have to try it or think about it. Just doing what I was told. I know this one works, but it'd be interesting to think through that one a little bit more. All right, so here's the next critical step to getting a good square. Oops, that was a good one. So I said that my cut line was somewhere in this area, and that, you know, at this point you could do a double check. You could change your mind if you wanted to as to where you cut, as long as you left yourself enough room. But I kind of like that a little bit bigger diamond that's formed by this guy, so we'll keep it there. So what I'm going to do is take the framing square, and as carefully as I can, I'm going to line it up with the seam where I think I want my cut to be. And the more carefully you can do this, the better off you are. I'm going to draw a line. Then I'm going to flip it. I'm going to do the same thing. And then I can check my work by putting this straight edge across both of them. If it is nice and straight all the way across, I did a good job drawing that line. I can just darken it up a little bit. If you didn't do a good job, you might see that the lines are a little bit like this. But I can still sort of fix that by laying this across and just averaging it out and then making a line. Or if it's really bad, I would flip it over on the other side and do the operation again. So now we just cut along this line. This is one of the reasons I do the sort of the longer cut first, so that, because this gets, you know, pretty long as it is. So all right, so now it's critical. Almost every cut we've done to this point with 2-way and 4-way book matches, if you were off a little, all it did was just change the way your match was going to be. This, if you're off the line, means that when you put it together, you're going to have something like this, where the seams aren't exactly lining up straight. So you want to take care to have the same amount of pencil lines showing all the way across. Where the clamp goes. Remember, you gotta stay against this straight edge or you're not gonna have a good match. The other thing you can do is be rocking your saw as you're cutting so that you're not always using just this part of the saw. It's kind of a natural temptation to do that. So that'll get dull quicker than the rest of the saw. The saws aren't quite as efficient as cross-cutting as they are going with the grain, so you'll notice it takes a little more time and effort to cut through going this direction. Alright, remember to sand it this time. So we overhang it 1/16 of an inch. Hold it down. If it sticks out any further than that, it might bend as you're sanding it. We don't want that. Nice even stroke. So since the cut line is longer than this, I got to really be careful that I'm making even strokes the entire way so that I don't put a dip or a hump in here. I usually give a couple more strokes on end grain like this because it tends to be a little rougher cut. Alright. So now, careful when you're untaping the veneer. You guys may have run into this. If I just kind of pulled it from this, just kind of pulled it down, sometimes you can tear it out. So coming at an angle like that works a little better. It tears off like that. So now the only thing I can do is line up the seams. Since I cut through my tape here, I'm going to move a piece of tape back so that I can uncover the seam and line them up. So that's all you can do at this point and hope that the rest of your stuff lined up well. I'm pretty good on this side, not as good on this side. And that's not uncommon, it's really hard. I mean, the grain's changing as you go through the stack. It's not like when you put the mirror on there, where you're taking the top piece and mirroring it perfectly. So you try the best you can to line things up as you go. And
It looks pretty good though.
yeah, with something like this that is very uniform, you tend to have better luck.
Isn't the other side you're concerned about?
Well, that's true. So maybe it'll look better on the other side. Or worse. What was I going to say?
If one side does look better than the other, you could just flip the right. There's nothing stopping you from using the top.
No, I could turn it over now.
Except for all the tape.
Yeah.
Right. So you might
have to tape the other side.
You might be better off just putting a couple pieces of tape, flipping it over, and seeing how it looks on the other side, because you can change your mind at that point. Definitely good. It's nice when that seam snaps together like that. All right. So it does seem like the other side might be a slightly, well,
I like this side.
I guess I'll have to take a look. I might change my mind later. And what I'm seeing is my pencil line here too, which makes it look like there's a little bit of a gap on that seam. But it's my pencil line that I drew earlier. So I'll cut this to size, and before I put the veneer tape on, I might change my mind on the matching, because on the other side, I had one side that matched up really well, and the other side not as well. On here, both of them are a little bit off. But the thing is, anybody walking up to this is not going to see that, because everything sort of averages out. From back here, you're seeing lots of nice diamonds in there that are pretty cool. So now what we need to do is take our piece of MDF that represents the size that I want. So where's my top? Oh, it's right on top. All right, so this is the piece that I want to use to cut this size. So now, since I'm a four-way book match, I have to put a mark on all four sides of this guy with the center line. 14 3/4, so 7 3/8. So always come in from both sides so that you know you've done your math right. Although you'll know really quick if you try to line this up and you haven't got the center marks on, because nothing will line up right. So it sometimes takes a little doing, and I also have to decide one of these sides is just a little bit longer than the other. This one. My diamonds seem to spread out this way a little bit more, so I'm going to put the long direction that way. And now I just got to keep messing until I get all four of those to line up. Sometimes takes a few tries. So there needs to be somewhere that works, or at least close to it. Okay, right about there. So now I'm going to carefully cut this to size. By coming in from both directions on all my cuts. At this point, I would just put my veneer tape on like normal. Remember, let's not put the veneer tape on until we know for sure that we're going in the bag. So if you want to get this done ahead of time, just leave the blue tape on it like this, and we'll just leave it here. And then when we're ready, we'll put veneer tape on and throw it right in the bag. Now, some of you may want to try to do it a different way. Let's say we had this on here and you wanted it to be more like this with some people like to try this where they bring the points of the veneer out to the corners. This is not square, so it'll never work that way. You won't get it to hit every corner unless you took some, I mean, you could figure out the geometry to make that work, but it would be difficult. And also, if it shifts, if you put it in the bag and it shifts even a little bit, you don't have a way to fix that. So it's a little bit, you can get 2 of the corners to line up, but the other 2 corners won't line up. So just keep that in mind. One thing you might want to do is just trace out your top onto a piece of paper, some of that tracing paper back there, and draw, if you're going to do something like that, draw it out so that you can actually see what you're going to get when you're done. So I just usually like to do it this way, where things come here, because then that way you won't notice if anything gets off a little bit.